Shalom, Cowltopusers. Welcome to the video for Clue 4 of Cowltopus Mystery Knit-a-long. I'm Laura Nelkin, and it has been an absolute blast to knit Cowltopus with you all this month. I gotta admit, I'm a little sad. It's time for our final clue. I've had such a good time with you all in the Ravelry group, in the Facebook group, seeing all of your octopuses. Y'all have been sharing octopus videos and books and stories and podcasts with me, and I've been sharing them with you. We've been crocheting amigurumi on the side for fun because we can't get enough of octopuses while we wait for each clue to come out. So this is the final clue for Cowltopus. If you are following along, you will need to have purchased the pattern for Cowltopus. I'll give you a link in the video notes below. You're welcome to join us anytime. If you're just stumbling across this video and you are intrigued and want to knit Cowltopus, you can knit it anytime. It's okay that the mystery knit-along is over. It's not a mystery anymore, but it's still a really super fun knit. I think one of my most fun mystery knit-alongs to date, actually. So once you have the pattern, follow along with that as I go through the tips and tricks that I think that you'll need to know to have success with Clue 4. In Clue 3, you decided if you were knitting Simplopus or Complextopus, and you are going to be continuing on that for this clue. So I'll go over tips and tricks for Complextopus first, and then I'll go over a few things that you need to know for Simplopus, but we're really good to go at this point. It is smooth sailing to the end of this mystery knit-along. So let's get going with Complextopus. Okay, with Complextopus, you actually have two choices. So if you were new to Brioche and you love knitting that Brioche stitch and you don't really want to add in another element if you're not ready to do like patterning with Brioche, you can keep going with Complextopus as is through round 4. So don't switch your main color and contrast color like we're going to do if you're working the Brioche wave stitch. Don't change your stitch count. Keep it at 94 stitches and then continue on knitting until you have 4 grams of the contrast color left. And then you'll jump ahead to the last 3 final rounds of Complextopus and the bind off. So that is option number 1. The second option for Complextopus is to work the Brioche wave stitch, which is a 14 stitch repeat. When you work this, the first thing that you're going to be doing is flipping your main color and your contrast color. So the setup round 1 and setup round 2 switch so that your Brioche knits are worked with your contrast color and your Brioche purls are worked with your main color. At the same time on setup round 1, you are increasing by 2 stitches so that the 14 stitch repeat can be repeated 7 times around your cowl. That was a lot of words. It is all written into the pattern for you as well. So double check with that to make sure that is making sense to you. So once you've worked those setup rounds, there's one stitch that you'll run into in the setup round that I'm about to show you on my needles in the chart, and that's the Brioche 3 increase stitch. So let's look at the chart together, because once you work the setup rounds and you are ready to work this chart, you're going to see that the chart is a 10 round repeat, but what's different about this chart is that all of your rounds are going up the right side of your chart because you're always working on the right side of your work because you're working in the round. So every round is read from the right to the left. And remember that every round has 2 passes, but what has flipped in Clue 4 is that your contrast color is the first round work and your main color is the second round worked. Now I've also given you this chart written out so you can decide if you want to work the Brioche wave stitch from the chart or the written directions. You can do a combination of both. Some people with brioche find working from written directions to be easier. Some people like a chart more. I like to make sure y'all are happy, so I gave you both in this pattern. Another thing to say that I already said, but I'll repeat it, is you're repeating the chart 7 times around and you are working the written instructions, repeating from the star around, and it's 7 times total. So in those setup rounds, I have you place markers for the 14 stitch repeat to make sure that you are on target. Now, in that chart and written instructions for the brioche wave stitch, there are 2 stitches that you probably have not worked before, and I thought it would be fun to do those stitches on the needles together. So I am all set up at the beginning of a round 1 with my contrast color, and we're going to work across the first 14 stitches, because that will teach you everything that you need to know. So I'm working with my contrast color. You'll see that my main color is held all the way to the front and off to the right. That technique of holding your yarn to the front of your work for the brioche stitches is the same. And now I am going to brioche knit, slip 1 yarn over 4 times. So I am going to do that 4 times. Probably already lost count. I believe that's 3. And now I'm going to do it 1 more time and just make sure I'm right. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. And now I'm at the brioche right SL decrease. And what that is a right leaning brioche decrease that takes 3 stitches and makes it 1 stitch. So the first thing that I'm going to do, let me just get this all set up on my needles, is I'm going to slip the next stitch and its yarn over knitwise. And now I'm going to knit 1, and I'm going to pass that stitch and its yarn over that stitch just worked. And now I'm going to return that stitch to the left hand needle, and then I'm going to pass this next stitch and its yarn over that stitch. And now I'm going to move this stitch back to the right hand needle. And you'll see what that does is take 3 brioche stitches and make them 1 stitch. And it's got this nice little right slanting decrease to it. And now I am going to slip 1 yarn over, and that next stitch is the brioche 3 stitch increase, which takes 1 brioche stitch and makes it 3 stitches. You'll be using this in the setup round as well. So what I'm going to do here is brioche knit, but not take that stitch off of the left hand needle. And now I'm going to make a yarn over, and I'm going to brioche stitch into that stitch again. So I've taken 1 stitch and made it 3 stitches. So my stitch count is not changing. Every repeat starts with 14 stitches and ends with 14 stitches. But what this patterning does is create this really lovely little wave stitch in the brioche that you'll see start to build as you work it. So those are the 2 new stitches that you needed to learn if you're doing the brioche wave stitch. Now what you're going to do, and this is a little tricksy, let's talk it out and look at your pattern while I'm telling you about this. You're going to get a little like, am I going to run out of yarn? What's happening with my yarn usage? If you remember, I wrote this pattern so you can't run out of yarn. You're going to be working rounds 1 through 10 with both the CC and the MC of that brioche wave stitch. What you're going to do is you're probably going to get rounds 1 through 10 worked. At some point, you're going to want to know how much yarn 2 rounds takes. So if you work the rounds 1 and let me say that again. If you weigh your yarn, so weigh your CC and weigh your MC, and then work rounds 1 and rounds 2 complete, both with your contrast color and your main color, and weigh your yarn again, and then subtract those 2 numbers, that's how much CC and MC it takes to work 2 rounds. So as you get into that second repeat of rounds 1 through 10, if you do that on your first round 1 and round 2, you'll want to end with either a round 4, a round 6, a round 8, or around 10, and you'll want to have about 4 grams of your CC left over. So start to work 2 more rounds at a time, like 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Weigh your CC, you know how much yarn it took you to work those 2 rounds, and you'll be able to do the math to see how many rounds you could get worked. If you can go into a third repeat and you want that section of your Cowltopus to be longer, you can certainly do that. You can end up folding it up if you want to when you wear it. That is up to you. I stopped mine. I think I got 2 full repeats done with mine. Maybe I ended at round 8 with the first one I did. So you'll get into that second repeat. You probably won't get into a third repeat unless you started with more yarn. So that's what you're going to need to do. Then once you are done working the brioche wave stitch, you're going to jump ahead to those last 3 rounds. You're going to end up cutting your MC and just working with your CC for those last 3 rounds. You're going to resolve your brioche stitches. You're going to work a purl round and a knit round, and then you're going to do an Icelandic bind off, which is my favorite bind off to like tidy up brioche stitches. And I will give you a link to a full-length tutorial that I have on the Icelandic bind off if you have never worked it before or if you need a refresher. Sometimes I even have to go look at my own video to be like, how do you do that again? I kind of forget. So I'll give you that link in the show notes if you haven't worked the Icelandic bind off before. And I actually believe I also put it in the pattern. I was just checking that. It is in the pattern for you if you need that. So that's everything that I think you need to know for Complextopus. Not super hard, but definitely kicking it up a little bit of a notch for those of you who are ready for just a little bit of new learning and something different in Clue 4. If you are happy with that brioche, just keep going with it and then jump ahead to those last 3 rows and bind off just like if you were doing the brioche wave stitch. Now, if you're working Simplopus, let's talk about that next. Okay, those of you who are working Simplopus, I made things real easy on you. You just get to continue doing what you were doing. I'm pretty sure someone's going to ask if they can flip over to brioche. I think you could just jump over to the setup rows in Clue 3 and work some brioche at the end if you want to. If you're ready for that and you're done with your 2-color ribbing, it's really effective on the cowl to just have that bottom going all the way down in the 2-color 2x2 ribbing. So once you continue to work it, you're going to want to stop when you have about, let's see what I said, at least 2 grams of your contrast color left. You might want to have a tiny bit more of that, but 2 grams should be fine. And then you're going to cut your MC, leaving a 6-inch tail. And then you're going to work Jenny's kind of surprisingly stretchy bind off on your ribbing so that it's stretchy enough to go over your neck, but it's not so stretchy that it's baggy. And this is a way that I work Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which was developed by my friend Jenny Stamen, so that you end up with a bind off that is stretchy, but not too stretchy, just the right amount of stretchy. And I do have a tutorial, but I wanted to show it to you quickly on here. It is about, I would say in my tutorial, which is linked in the pattern, it's halfway through, maybe at like the 3.5-minute mark, where I go into this version that I want you to work with the modified section. But let me show it to you quickly on my needles. So I have ended with a contrast color round with a round 6. And my knit stitches, I'm just going to bind off what I would call normal. But my purl stitches, I'm going to add in a yarn over. And I find what this does is it makes the knit columns of the bind off really, really neat, but then adds in this really lovely flexibility in the purl columns. So when I get to the knit stitches, I'm just going to bind them off without adding in an extra yarn over. And then in the purl stitches, I'm going to work a yarn over and then pass over the yarn over and that stitch when I work the purl stitches. And I'll just do one more and I'll show you what that looks like together. Let me just get that kind of onto that needle. So you'll see that it's elastic, but it's a little tighter at those knit columns. And what that does is make just for like the tidiest elastic little bind off on a 2x2 ribbing. I have a feeling some of you are going to be like, wow, that's new to me. And I'll be using that in the future again. So enjoy that little trick that I love for a bind off. The next thing I want to show you is a tidy little way to join a project that you bound off that's worked in the round so that it's quite seamless at that point where the first bound off stitch and the last bound off stitch join. So let me show you that next. Okay, so I have bound off all the way around. And what I want to show you is how I like to join the end of my round to the beginning of my round so that it looks really, really neat. And the first thing that I do is cut my yarn when I am done binding off all my stitches. I have my last stitch on my needle right there. And I give myself about a 6-inch tail. And then I pull that stitch all the way out right there. So I've pulled my yarn all the way out that stitch. And then I grab a tapestry needle and I thread my yarn onto the tapestry needle. And then I look for the first bound off stitch and I look for both legs of that bound off stitch. And you'll see I'm just going underneath both of those legs with my knitting needle. And what I'm doing is creating an extra stitch right here. And then I'm going to take that needle and come down in right in the middle of that stitch. You can see the yarn tail when I cut it is coming out right there. I'm going to go right back in right there and then pull up, and you'll see that I made one more stitch that joins you perfectly together into the round. And then I'll take this and I'll bring it to the inside and then weave in this end, kind of going down this column on the inside of my knitting. And I'm pretty careful when I weave it in to like split some stitches as I go so that it gets just really buried in there. And then you can go ahead and trim it. And look how tidy and neat that is. Isn't that magic? It's such a simple, slick little move to join that together in the round. I can find it, but I almost can't find it. So there's a little bit of magic for you. So once you have finished your Complextopus or your Simplopus, your Cowltopus is complete. And I know you have a happy, sad feeling right now, right? Such a fun little knit. So the next thing to do is to talk about finishing and blocking and weaving in ends. I just showed you how to weave in an end. So let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, time to finish up that Cowltopus. What I would suggest doing is this. One, I would weave in your ends, but I would not trim them yet. I like to trim my ends after I block a piece, just in case they worm out a little bit. If you trim them off after you weave them in and then block, sometimes they worm their way a bit and end up popping back out. So better to wait to trim them. Next, go ahead and block your Cowltopus. Everything looks better after you block it. Many of you worked your project with superwash yarn, so superwash yarn doesn't change that much between blocking and unblocking, but your stitches will really neaten up after you block your project. The way that I blocked my Cowltopus, sorry, I'm getting confused with all my puss words here, is I filled my bathroom sink with some warm water. I added some wool wash. My water was not hot and not cold. I put my Cowltopus in there, let it soak for like 10-ish minutes, and then I gently squeeze it out. I don't like stretch it. And then I roll it up in a towel to get any extra moisture out of there. And then I laid mine down flat with the hood flat, with the neck flat, all together just on the table. And I let that dry. Now you might find if you block that way that you end up with a crease down the back of the hood and a crease on each side of the cowl. I did not end up with creases on mine. If you are worried about having a crease, you can actually take a towel or two and roll it up so that it is the thickness of the neck and stick that into the neck so that your cowl part section dries flat in the round. Whenever I end up with fold lines from blocking things, sometimes I'll just steam it out with my steamer or my iron. I don't touch the yarn with my iron, but I just give it a little shot of steam, and then any little fold that's in there just comes right out with that. So that is what you'll do for blocking. I'm purposely being vague because one of the things I love about mystery knit-alongs is you all not having me show you what this final thing looks like, but some of you getting to finish your Cowltopuses and post them in the thread so that you can see each other's getting finished. So if you're confused by that stuff, maybe just like wait a day and somebody will have their Cowltopus done and blocked, and you will see what that blocking looks like. I know my testers are like chomping at the bit to share their projects with you. So I told them to wait just a little bit, but they'll be sharing those. Thank you so much, Lois, Susie, and Justine, for helping me out with Cowltopus. So much fun working with you guys. So after you have blocked and it is dry, you may trim those ends, and then it is time to look at that little join and decide if you think it needs some reinforcement with that 12-inch strand of MC3 or of MC that you have left over to tidy that up a little bit. And I have a Cowltopus here that is Lois's. And I don't think that Lois actually felt like she needed to close hers up, but I think I have a strand of MC2, so the contrast is going to be really nice as I show you how to put in this little single crochet chain to tidy things up if you want to. It is not necessary. So I'm showing you right here that little join right there with the knit 2 together, where you're going from that transition from clue 2 to clue 3 right there. If you want to do this, the first thing that you'll do is make a slip knot and put it onto a crochet hook. And then what I'll do is, I actually think the best way to do this is actually come not on the outside of that integrated I-cord edging, but come up just a few rows and come to the inside. And I'm going to start right there, just kind of like 5 rows up. And I'm going to put my crochet hook underneath both loops of a stitch, and then grab my yarn and pull it through, and then grab my yarn and pull it through both loops. And then I'm going to go ahead and do that on the next stitch. And what this is going to do is just reinforce that join a little bit. I do this oftentimes on the necklines of sweaters. I actually did this on Ola Lola that I'm wearing at the corners to reinforce it a little bit. I'm going down, grabbing the yarn, making a yarn over and pulling it through. You'll see that I'm getting to this point that maybe feels a little bit loose, so I'm going to come under that stitch, but I think I'm also going to come under that spot right there just to give myself a little bit more reinforcement. And now I'm going to come around again. I'm going to come around right here under those two, grab my yarn. Whenever you do a little reinforcement like this, it's a science and an art all at the same time, because every situation is going to be a little bit different. But again, the goal here is just to give yourself a little bit of reinforcement. And then I'm going to finish up just like that, just so you can see what I did on the inside right there. If you like the way that looks and you have enough main color, you could actually go all the way around the hood if you worked with a single color for the main color. If you have an extra contrast color and you want to go all the way around, you can do that. I don't think that's necessary. You might find that it's just necessary right at that little point to tidy things up a little bit. So please do ask any questions that you have in the Facebook group, in the Ravelry group. No need to ask in both places. Ask in one or the other. We are on it. We are here to help you have success finishing your Cowltopus. I'm hoping that most of you have your Cowltopuses done within a week. I tried to keep these clues really, really accessible so that you could get them done in a week's time. So I'm hoping that everybody is finished with their Cowltopuses. I'll be posting contest threads both in the Ravelry group and the Facebook group. You are allowed to what I call double dip in those threads, so you can enter your finished Cowltopus in both places. I've got some really fun prizes for you to end up this end of Cowtober. Plus, I have a kind of big present for you to end out the month that, especially if you've knit Cowltopus, I think you're going to be very excited to sink your needles into this new project because it's going to be familiar to you and a really good gift. Everybody in my family has already asked for one. So if that's an indicator of a successful gift knitting project, I don't know what else is. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Cowltopus journey. I acknowledge that mystery knit-alongs are a giant leap of faith. For me, I'm like, oh, are they going to like it? Do they think I've lost my mind? Are they just going diving underwater with me and I'm like deep into octopuses forever? I so appreciate you trusting me. I hope you've had a really good time knitting Cowltopus. I hope you look forward to future knitting adventures with me. I certainly look forward to knitting with you. It's a good time to remind you that if you aren't on my mailing list is the best way to keep up with what I am up to. I send out emails every week-ish as the spirit moves me, but that's the place I really tell you what is going on in my life and on my needles. We have to end with one last magic ball. So I'm going to say goodbye, and then whatever the magic ball says is how we are ending our journey together. So here we go. Are you ready? Thank you. I'm a little sad. So much fun with you guys. I'm like really shaking her. Okay. Oh, that's a good one for the very end. Hike and knit. So y'all get to practice knitting and walking. Be careful. Do it somewhere flat that's well paved or stoned or something. Happy knitting.